Carsten Lucassen with us as a very interesting guest to talk more about digital communication at Viessmann, how they do it with their employee app and their other communication initiatives going on. I hope you can understand us well. I hope the voice quality is really good. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the chat that you see below the presentation, type in the question, and we will try to react to that pretty quick as we go. My name is Frank Wolf. I'm one of the founders of Staffbase. We are happy to be in the market for now over 3 years. We are also happy to have a great collection of customers right now where we provide a whole new way to do employee communication via mobile apps, but also via a very interesting desktop experience provided by the Staffbase platform. The goal today is not to talk about the company, not to talk about Staffbase, but hear from an expert at one of our customers how they implemented, how they launched the app, what are the experiences, the learnings, and also the results of all of this, and how they dealt with the typical questions and challenges that came up during the project. So I welcome Carsten Lucassen. He's a journalist from as an origin. He worked for quite a couple of large German newspapers. Then he changed the sites and joined Viessmann and is now responsible for digital communication at Viessmann. And we are really happy to have you here today. And as the first question, we know you had a pretty big event in the last couple of days. Please tell us a bit more about that in the beginning.
Yes, hi everybody. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about Viessmann. It's a pleasure to talk about what we do digital communications. And yes, we had a big event on Saturday, our company's 100th birthday. The company was founded in 1917, so was a big event for us. We celebrated it together with 15,000 people on 3 locations in Germany, in Berlin, here in Allendorf at our headquarters, and in Hof. Yes, and was fun, really. Was a good event. And perhaps to start things off a little bit, I would just give you 3 or 4 pieces of information on the Viessmann company. Perhaps for those of you who are based in the US, might not be that familiar with Viessmann. Viessmann is a family business from Germany. We're a producer of heat generators, heating systems, hydraulic heating systems, refrigeration systems, and we also do industrial large-scale solutions. As I said, founded in 1917. The company now has about 12,000 members of staff and roughly 2.2 billion euros of turnover. We're an international company. We've got plants, factories in about 11 countries. We've got 100 sales offices around the world. In the US, we're based in Rhode Island. In Canada, we're based in Waterloo, Ontario. And yeah, right about half of our turnover is generated outside of Germany. So the international market is quite important for us. And yeah, that's why we started thinking about internal communications as well.
Perfect. And I learned you as a very international company, different languages are pretty important. Many of your employees are working in the factories or not sitting at a desk, and they are speaking a lot more languages than just German and English, right?
Yes, right. German and English are the corporate languages, mandatory for all desk workers. But we also got factories in France, in the US, in Canada, obviously that's English as well, Russia, Turkey, Finland, Hungary, Poland. So we've got about 8 or 9 major languages we need to cover. And we did it.
Perfect. We'll talk about this in a second. Let's first start off with a broader view on your communications function within Viessmann. So it would be interesting to learn a bit more about what are the major topics that are drive your department right now. So what are you looking at there?
Yes, we all started about 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, when the first generation of our family business joined the company. So we looked at everything we do in our business, in our market, and we found that digitalization is one of the most important challenges we need to tackle. And this is certainly true for our products. This is certainly true for our sales divisions. So we set up quite a lot of digital initiatives to get the company up to speed. And one of these initiatives was the creation of a new platform for internal communications. We didn't talk about an app initially, we talked just about a platform. And we found out that in order to get the message across, in order to get the cultural transformation of the company towards a digital organization, to get that started, we needed to have a more agile method of communicating with our employees. So if you look at the left-hand side of this slide, you see our old company newspaper with 3 issues a year. And we found out that so much was going on in digital transformation that we would have to print, say, 30 or 60 issues a year to get the messages across. And it's certainly not viable. It's also extremely expensive from a production point of view. So we looked at the intranet and asked ourselves if the internet is the right medium to get these issues across. Actually, it isn't, because, for example, here at Allendorf, in our headquarters, we've got 4,400 colleagues, and about 2,000 of them have no access to a company PC or any kind of electronic device. So they're production workers, and we cannot reach them with the internet. So the answer was obvious. We need something that is in the pocket of everyone, smartphone, and we need to address the private devices as well. And this is actually where it all started. And when all the pieces fell together, it was a bit like Tetris. And we came up with the idea of an employee app that would do us a lot of good.
Great. One of the first questions people ask when you talk about an employee app is actually, what do you do with it, right? So what are the use cases that you have in the app? It would be great to talk a bit more about how was this journey for you guys at Viessmann, and what did you start off with, and what were the use cases that you added over time into the app?
I think what we learned right at the beginning, I did a lot of IT projects or computer projects in the past, and you always start up with making big plans and making big descriptions of the final product. And we did it quite differently here. We started, this is the.
Let's just show it for a second so we have a visual, but.
Yes, could you just go back to the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I messed up the.
No.
Here we go.
Here we are. So what our idea was not to make big plans and not stick to them, but we started just with a minimal viable product. We just wanted to start with 2 or 3 news channels and perhaps a meal plan for the staff restaurant, and that's about it. So our idea was to get something on the road quickly, and nevertheless, it was an ambitious timeline. The kickoff was on December the 1st, a management meeting. And 2.5 months later, I think of the holiday season, we had the rollout on February the 1st, 2016, with just these 3 news channels and the meal plan. And we took it from there. We always talk to our colleagues and to our members of staff what they want, what their expectations are. And one of the first expectations, obviously, was that everyone should have the app. So we added the onboarding of our blue-collar workers. Was quite a challenge because of technical reasons, but we finished it in March 2016. And then we added the timesheet so that the blue-collar workers can see how much holiday they have left, or how much overtime they did in the last week. This was also important for them. We added that in April, and so on and so on. we started the internationalization of the app in July, and this year everything has been focused on the 100 years celebration, and of course our major trade fair, the ISH in Frankfurt in spring. Yeah, so it was an ongoing process, and I think the message was we actually didn't know at the start what we wanted. We just asked the users, what is it you expect? What do you want? And we try to integrate as much of it as possible. Yeah, and that's where it all took us. Exactly, it took us about here, I think.
Perfect. Yeah. So let's talk about results. So what did you learn? What are the results you see in the organization? Where are you standing?
Yeah, we can't do without the app anymore. It's become the main communications hub for all internal communications. We far surpassed our intranet use. We've got about 3,500 users for the intranet, and you can see right now our active user count is 7,200. In Germany, we've got a coverage of roughly 90%. That means we need to grow a little bit in the foreign countries. But still, we've got 17 locations. You can see on the map the countries, and the small white dots are the plants. We've got the 8 languages, and we've got right about 40 news channels right now. 4 of them managed centrally by me and my team, and the others are managed by our sub teams in the countries. Yeah, we've got 3,000 posts per year, and it's always good to remind oneself of the past. When we had the printed newspaper, we had about 90 posts or articles a year. So that means about 2.5 a week. We wanted to start with 3 or 4 a week when we set up the app, and now we're about at 12 to 15 posts a day. So we've seen
That's amazing.
an amazing increase in communications, which is a little bit of slowing down right now. We already got quite a good coverage, but what we still see is an amazing increase in interaction. So the people started reading and started joining us, and now after about 1.5 years, they start to interact more and more. And so my colleague and friend Jana Tyra from Porvo, Finland, pointed it out admirably. It's a great communication tool. It's easy and it's fast to use. And I think the speed of it all, this is what amazes most of our colleagues every day. So when we talk about the festival, last Saturday, we had about 3,000 employees on site in Allendorf and the family, which all in all makes about 11,000 people. We've got 3,000 users of the app, statistically possible, and 2,900 of them interacted with the app during the festival. So instead of having a party and drinking beer and dancing around, they also posted and commented and liked, and they did that even during the festival. And I think this is a very good example of how integrated the V2Go experience is in our Viessmann brand right now.
That's fantastic, and I think it's also a good example for a use case that we see at other customers as well, helping communication around an event in preparation during the event and after the event is a very good thing to do. Talking about speed, I know that push notifications are a way to achieve speed on your side. So push notifications is actually something that comes up on the home screen. The user, you can mark a news and say, I want this to be pushed, and this means it's you get a lot more reach typically. But I learned that it's also a speed thing from your perspective.
Yes, it is indeed. With push notifications, you can create an audience quite quickly. If you think about, once again, about the festival or any other event in the company, I'm sitting in the back writing a post and I'm pushing it, I can be sure that about 80% of our colleagues reach out to their cell phones and read the post within 20 or 30 minutes. This is a good thing, but it should not be overdone. So if your cell phone is ringing every 20 minutes, during your day in the office, that would be a nuisance. So we try to limit it a little bit, because we also found out that if you don't push it and it's still a viable and essential information, it gets read anyway. It takes just a little bit longer. It takes about a week to generate a similar audience. So you need to take push notifications with a little bit of salt. It's very good, but you should limit it. We also limit it to office hours, and of course, we don't push on weekends. And so on an overall week, we have about 1, 2, or 3 push notifications here from company headquarters, and the rest is for the colleagues in our local factories in the countries, so that they can create traffic for their news channels as well. So, but
That's
push notifications is an essential part of it. Yes.
yeah, and I think as you pointed out, it's essential to manage it, to know about with great power comes always great responsibility, right? So I think that applies for push. What I think is really interesting is we see certain organizations who keep push just for the central editing team and don't give push to the local channels. I think it's a very interesting and great case that you say, hey, the local teams are important too. We want to give them that like this feature because it helps them to generate speed, and it's interesting to learn that it works for you guys, right?
Yes, it does. And actually, I think the local teams are even more important for the push notifications. Um, we're with 12,000 people. We're quite a big organization, and but most of us tend to work in communities of about 50 to 300 people. This is our natural environment, and this is where the push notification works best. And I think everything we try to do, we try to do it user-centric. So we always try to look at the need of the user, and the need is to have the information that is relevant to him. And this is obviously, if you're an employee in Turkey, the Turkish content is more relevant than the German. So from a perspective of user centricity, the push notifications in the local channels are essential. So actually, it was never a question to limit that.
That's it's a great discussion. I need to ask one more question about it.
Yes.
You would expect at some organization that like the CEO would say, get this out. I want this to be communicated, and tells you push this out, right? So there's some sort of, from the central side, you could say, I want this to be pushed, and so on. How do you experience that in your organization? How do you see that?
We don't do any authentication or any approval stages for our news post. That, for example, on Monday we had a Q&A session with our owner Maximilian Viessmann, and I wrote an article on that Q&A session, and of course I published it, but it was not really that important on that day, because the pictures from the festival were obviously more important. So I decided not to push it for this day, and I didn't ask for approval for this decision, and I didn't show the article to him. So it's just a matter of trust, of letting the communication department decide what's best for the organization. Of course, we like to get as much feedback as possible, and we also like to have hints from colleagues what they prefer to as a user experience. But there is no rule that is written in stone. We do it as we go.
That's interesting. It's reminds me of another customer of a team there that said, communications team, yes, we do this if we get the freedom to actually decide what we publish, right? So give us more freedom to do this, and then we move forward with this type of platform. So we have one question. Did you encounter negativity from senior leadership, introduction of the app, business case, cost justifications? Let's start with the senior leadership regarding the introduction of the app. I think it was triggered, pushed by the senior leadership, right?
Yeah, we had as I mentioned, in the course of the digital transformation of the company, we had quite a lot of digital initiatives, about 100 or so, and internal communications was a digital initiative. So we had the mandate from the senior management to set it up. But let me tell you just what happened shortly after the introduction of the app. We had a big custom event 3 or 4 days after the app started. I was sitting in the conference room in the last row, taking notes on my laptop, and I saw our CEO sitting in the front row, listening to the panel, discussion panel, and suddenly the CEO got up, moved around in the room, took out his cell phone, and made a picture. And about a minute or so, my email client rang, and I got an email from the CEO, and he said, I saw you sitting in the back. You're probably doing a post for the app. I've got a good photo opportunity here. Perhaps you can use my photo. So, and obviously that's what I did. I took the photo, the CEO took himself and finished the post. So this is a little example that shows how the senior management is involved. They're very much encouraging it. And as for the business case, or the initial positioning of the app, the real business problem was that we had no means of communicating directly and quickly with our colleagues. So if you want to move a company from a traditional to a digital organization, you've got so much to discuss. You've got your agile working methods to introduce, you've got your Scrum teams and everything, so much to say. And if you just print a newspaper every 3 months, you can't keep up with the speed. So this was the business case.
Perfect. We have one more question about bad language in the app. So you can write comments. Do
Yes,
you experience any sort of bad language things where you need to go in and say, we need to delete or hide the comment?
We never delete a comment, and we never hide it, and we never disable the like function, except if someone says something that is really inappropriate. And with about, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 posts in 2 years or 1.5 years, we had exactly one case where a colleague wrote a comment reminding another member of staff that the MOT on his car has expired, so that his car had to go to the TÜV, the technical examination in Germany. And he wrote that if you don't do that the next week, I'm going to inform the police. That's
Really?
the one.
Oh my God.
Yes, just not kidding. That's
Okay.
the one post I deleted, and
Okay.
I think it's just an exception. So, no negative feedback whatsoever. Of course, if you get an announcement from senior management on a strategy decision, for example, you might get a lot of likes, but you won't get a lot of comments because nobody's going to say, "Hey, thumbs up for that decision." That's obvious. The amount of comment depends on the content, but we never disable it.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Thanks for that. If we don't have another question now, I would like to move on to some more operative questions around the introduction of the app. A lot of these questions are coming up quite often from our customers. Typical one would be, is this app mandatory for employees?
Definitely not. It's free. It's not part of our Viessmann IT microcosm. You don't need a company device for it. You don't need a company PC. You can sign up, or if you don't want, then you won't do it. Of course, we always try to put as much relevant content into the app to make it important for everyone. But as you can see, 90% roughly of our colleagues in Germany are already using it. So it's not mandatory, but it's I think it's a good idea to use it because you would miss out if you don't.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that's also a typical strategy that we see at other customers, really provide the value for employees. And with that, it's a great deal for them to actually download the app and use it and see the information. Have you deployed the app in the cloud, or is it hosted within Viessmann?
Frank, that's one you can answer. I think.
Yeah,
but it's hosted by you, isn't it?
It's a software as a service solution. We provide different data centers. So especially we see in Germany, data protection law is pretty strict in Germany. So we provide a German data center for our German and in many cases also European customers. But we also provide a data center hosted by Microsoft Azure in the US. So this is always hosted as in the cloud by our for our customers. And we have one other question: how did you get older employees to use the app? Like people that don't use mobile devices in their spare time. What's the main interest in using the app? Can we talk about this?
Yes, of course. It's the news, obviously, but there are a lot of other touch points between the company and the employee. For example, the meal plan of the restaurant, or the timesheet, or your pay slip in the end. So there are a lot of touch points, and we try to cover them as well. For example, in our production in Allendorf, in the plant itself, we've got a lot of older colleagues with no access to a PC, and they always want to know their timesheet. They always want to know how holiday they have left, or how much overtime they did. And before we had the app, they had the option to go to their supervisor at the end of the shift and ask them, "Hey, boss, how much overtime do I have?" And the boss had to look it up. If the boss was unlucky, he had to look it up for 60 people. So that was not really an option. And now we offer this function within the app, and this is very attractive for even for the older users to use. Just look it up themselves. And incidentally, this is also how we got the approval of our Works Council or trade union, because the trade union members or the Works Council members also had the ability to look up the overtime of a colleague. So if someone from the shop floor didn't want to ask his or her supervisor, he would go to the Works Council, and then 60 people were standing outside the Works Council office. And so this is how we got approval by them.
That's, by the way, something we see from other customers, especially Approval Workers Council, is a lot easier than many think, because it increases transparency, it increases interaction, also the ability to give feedback from employees. So typically, these would be topics that are high on the agenda of the Workers Council anyway, right?
We've got a question by Michael Hollinson about the deployment of the app and whether all functions were available at the start. No, it wasn't. We started with a minimal viable product, and you can see the roadmap from last year. So we added features over several months. We're not stopped. Actually, I think we only got started right now. We added them, and we always kept on talking to our colleagues and asking them what they want. I think this is really important, that you don't do it top down from a management perspective, but you ask the colleagues, do you want the timesheet, or what do you want first? What is more important, the meal plan or the timesheet? You get very good answers that way, and you can develop the app using that feedback.
Perfect. And we have one question about the intranet. Actually, that's a question I wanted to ask too. So perfect coincidence. Many of our customers using an intranet today. How does the app fit to the intranet at Viessmann? How do they play together?
They play very well together, because the intranet always had two functions at Viessmann, or two functionalities. The first part of our intranet was, let's say, a portal, a workflow tool where you can manage your travel expenses or things like that. And the second part of the intranet was the news side, or the news function. And we just stopped doing that. So the intranet today has no company news whatsoever. Just abolished everything. The internet now is just for employee self-service, and some static pages which are currently moved over to the V2Go platform as well. So we see them existing side by side, but in the long run, I think for most practical purposes, the app will supplant the intranet.
Perfect. We have one question about Yammer, and I think in general social collaboration software. And the question is, it's great to enable sort of collaboration and sharing. Do you see this through the app as well?
I would like to give a more indirect answer to that one. obviously the app is all about interaction communications, and I think Staffbase, from my perspective, would be ill-advised to compete with say tools like Asana or project management tools. This is something for specialists on another field. But what we see is that the app is some kind of social hub where you can jump off to other um, areas or to other tools. For example, what we are very much looking forward to is some kind of Slack integration. So we use Slack for team communications, for setting tasks, and having a Slack integration of the app would be something we are very much looking forward to. So the answer would be, it's not exactly a collaboration or sharing tool. That would be something we do, for example, with Google or with Wunderlist or whatever. It's a communications hub, and you can go from there to whatever you want to do.
It's maybe one comment on this from a product strategy perspective. We always say Staffbase is not a collaboration tool. So there are plenty of collaboration platforms out there. Slack is just one example of many, many others. So we see in a digital workplace of the future, you will have some sort of communication platform that also enables employee services, like Carsten described. And there will always be a collaboration part of this. Typically, we see that not all employees today need this collaboration part. It's especially the ones that are not sitting at a desk are a lot more productive in production or on the in field services and so on. So that's why it makes a lot of sense to think in these categories, but to distinguish what you do with platform. And I think one further comment about this one is also really, if we look, Carsten, at how you plan to further develop this. So in terms of future use cases with the app, and let's take this as a last question here. What do you plan with the app, and how do you want to position the app? And I think we also have a nice, I think, a great slide for that.
Yes, that's one. Yeah, it fits nicely. Actually, if you look at the app from perspective of a customer or employee journey, seeing the employee as the customer of internal communications, you can see that if this is the employee journey starting with the pre-boarding, with the application, you've got the onboarding, you've got the everything, all touch points during the working life of the colleague, until at the end, probably after 40 or 50 years, the person leaves the company and becomes a retired colleague. So this is the whole employee experience with all touch points. We just started with this segment. We just started with news, and the hashtag good to know is our moniker for the mobile internet. So this is where we started, and now we're moving into the other areas. We already use the public version of the V2Go for employer branding purposes. We've got links to our career landing pages there, for example. We also plan to use it to target new employees, give them information when they start working for the company. We already talked about the timesheet. We plan to expand that, hopefully this year, to add leave of absence, travels, and expenses. So we started with communications, but in the end, it's going to be an employee experience platform, managing everything you typically do as an employee. So that's the vision or the perspective for the next years. That's why I said we only just got started. We've got very much to do. We're looking forward to doing it with you guys.
Great, great. Thanks a lot for the insights. Looking at the time, we already crossed the 30 minutes. So I would open this up now for any remaining questions that you have coming in. I think we have one question. Sounds a bit more like a summary. It seems that one of the objectives of deploying an app would be to develop an effective internal communication channel with targeted content and improve audience understanding and analytics. I think
yes, I can. Yes, I can sign that. Yes,
it
agree.
sounds like a very good summary
yes.
of what we talked about. And maybe one comment on this one. We see there's a especially talking about Yammer and other collaboration tools. There has been a some sort of trend to use a lot of these collaboration tools also for internal communications. We see, especially for larger audiences, for distributed audiences, there's a need for more control of it. More control doesn't have to be always top down. So it can be, as we see in the example of Viessmann, also be local channels, a lot of interaction. So that's all part of this, but it's still a controlled environment where employees really see the content, really see the information that they want to see from their local offices. So I think that's a really great development in internal communications. Perfect. Thanks for the attention. Thanks for the time, Carsten. Thanks a lot for your time and for the very, very interesting insights. And everyone else, yeah, thanks a lot for joining. We hope to have you with us in one of the next upcoming webinars. If you have any questions, we are happy to answer them. Come back to us and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Thank you.